So I took the Polygon T7 out for its very first ride, and let me tell you guys, it was a complete eye-opener. I went in thinking like, this is a budget bike, so let's keep your expectations low.
All right, Siskiu T7, first ride. Let's get it.
But by the end of that ride, I found myself asking the question, do you even need a more expensive bike? This is the Polygon Siskiu T7, a budget trail bike that on paper punches way above its weight class. But paper stats mean nothing if this bike doesn't perform well out on the trails. The ride started with a real leg burner, you know, one of those steep fire road climbs, and I thought to myself, here we go, let's see if this bike can climb. On the way uphill, the geometry kept me feeling super comfortable, didn't feel like I was fighting the bike at all. The Shimano 12-speed Dior drivetrain was shifting great on the way uphill. It does have that sun race cassette on there, so I was a little bit concerned with how well that cheaper, more budget 12-speed cassette was gonna shift, but ended up having no issues with shifting on the way uphill.
So, bike is pedaling good on the way up. Nice, 175 mil crank, so of course, getting plenty of leverage out of there. Nice little stable rear end, not feel myself bobbing at all. Super efficient pedaling on the way uphill on here. Got that sun race cassette, shifting good through those gears, no issues. I will say on the fork, on this Recon RL fork, I'm feeling myself like blowing through the top end of that travel just a little bit, even with just pushing on it as I'm riding uphill. So we'll see how that does on the downhill portion of this ride.
Two things I need to cover real quick before we get any further into this video. First of all, this video is not sponsored, you guys. Bikes Online does send me these bikes, but here goes how it works out. They send me the bikes for like a 6-month-long demo, which gives me enough time to really kind of ride these bikes and give you guys my honest feedback and opinions on how these things perform for average riders like me and like you. I'm not some pro rider. This isn't a big sponsored YouTube channel. So rest assured, at the end of the day, all the opinions in this video right here are 100% mine, unedited and unfiltered, brought straight to you to let you know if I like this bike and if I think it's a good bike for you. Second of all, I wanted to take this bike out and ride it straight out of the box, other than, adding the water bottle cage, which Bikes Online, can you please start including water bottle cages with your bikes? Everyone needs a water bottle, especially with a trail bike like this. But other than adding that water bottle cage right there, like I said, straight out of the box, maybe even took it a little bit too far. I kept the dork disc on there, kept the stock stickers on there, riding the stock pedals with the reflectors still on there. So there's definitely some things that I want to change on this bike, but overall was pretty impressed with how this thing performed. But there were a couple complaints I had about this stock setup on the way uphill.
All right, we're almost up to the top and I got 2 complaints about this bike right now on the climb and performance. One, it's got a lot of play in the pedals right there. Low engagement hub. You can see how much play there is, and you can kind of hear that right there. So not a super high engagement hub. Hasn't been that much of an issue on the fire road, but as I get onto these single tracks and steeper like switchbacks, it becomes a little bit more of a problem as I go to get those extra half pedals in. 2, the tires on this bike, they feel like pretty grippy. Almost looks like a DHR2 looking kind of tread pattern. It's got these really high center knobs, which feels good. A lot of good consistent grip out of these. But that back tire on the way uphill is dragging just a little bit. Feels like it's slowing me down just a tiny bit. And if it had a faster rolling rear tire, that and probably removing these tubes to reduce that rolling weight a little bit, that would help me get up this trail just a little bit faster. But 2 small complaints, no big deal for a budget bike like this. It's to be expected. Let's get to the top and I'll talk about the downhill performance of this bike.
So after that climb was time for the downhill descent, and that's where this bike really surprised me. It felt stable and planted at speed. I had some concerns at first about only having a 140mm fork on here, especially with it being like this budget recon fork. But honestly, even on those more technical downhill sections, this bike really handled it like a champ. The suspension on this bike really surprised me. Even with that budget recon fork up there, this suspension setup handled every downhill trail that I threw at it with ease. The recon fork, I will be honest, over time, maybe something I look to upgrade with something just a little bit beefier, something that handles those more gravity focused trails that I like to ride a little bit better. But for the average rider, especially if you're just riding like blue and green and maybe hitting your occasional black diamond trails, I think this recon fork is plenty enough. The rear shock, to be honest, this is the RockShox Deluxe Select Plus. Trying to learn how to talk here. So it doesn't have the piggyback on there, but I don't think I'll ever need to upgrade this rear shock. I felt super stable and planted, wasn't blown through the travel. When I was pushing in around the berms, felt super confidence inspiring and comfortable. I mean, is this the high-end Fox or RockShox suspension? Definitely not. But will it handle everything that this type of bike is designed for? Yes, it will. So I think they did a good job speccing this suspension for this bike and the type of rider it's designed for. Now, when it came to that flowy section where I really like to see just like how playful and fun a bike is to ride, how fun it is to kind of whip around those berms and pop off those jumps, I was actually surprised once again with just how good this budget setup performs. Now, keep in mind in the past, I've rode the Polygon Siskiu T7, which is the most expensive version of this bike. So I guess I felt like this more budget-friendly setup would really limit the way I was able to ride this trail, but that couldn't be further from the truth.
All right, now we're gonna move on to Lizard Jump and Flow Trail. See how this budget bike handles those jumps, those berms. I'll definitely try and send it down this trail. There it goes. Oh, getting a feeling for it.
This thing corners better than I ever expected. The geometry strikes a really nice balance. It's not overly slack, so what you get is a bike that feels really nimble and playful and just kind of easy to maneuver around as you're going down that jump and flow trail. Now, I wasn't hitting the biggest jumps on that trail, but even on those smaller jumps, you could feel just like how easy this bike was to lift up, whip around, and just how much confidence this bike gave you in the air. Sure, it's not the lightest bike out there. No way. That's 38 pounds. Damn, 38 pounds, 4 ounces. So definitely not light. We might have to do something about that in future videos. What do you guys think? 38 pounds, 135, 140 trail bike? A little bit heavy, right? But for the price that you're getting and for what this bike is spec'd with, I was really impressed. That being said, there are a couple things I'm gonna tweak on this bike down the road just to make this thing perfect for the type of riding that I do. Now, keep in mind, the goal of this bike is to keep it really like a true budget build. So I'm not gonna go crazy throwing like a Fox Factory Kashima fork on there or anything like that. But here goes a couple things I will look to change. First and foremost, I need to remove that dork disc, those reflectors, and those stickers that I just don't need. Next, these pedals, I mean, they handled good enough for something you get right out of the box. You can just definitely throw these things on and ride with them, but I want something with a little bit more grip and something that's built just a little bit better to hold up to the test of time. Then I'll move on to the grips. These grips are okay, they'll get the job done, but they're a little bit too thin. I'll pick something that's a little bit thicker, a little bit more ergonomic, and maybe even match the color of like the grips that I choose to the color of the pedals. I'm thinking probably like red with this bike, but I don't know, leave a comment down below, like what color would you go with? What color accents, pedals, grips, what have you? I'm thinking red. Another important upgrade is the saddle. There's nothing wrong with this saddle, but it is a little bit slippery, like the texture on here, it's kind of slick. So on those longer rides, especially on your really like steep rides, you find yourself slipping a little bit on that saddle. And I would like something with just like a tiny bit more cushion, maybe something that's a tiny bit wider to fit my sit bones and my size. Another thing I need to change out, and to be honest, this is something I recommend you guys do to your bike before you even take it on its first ride, is do a tubeless conversion on this. Taking that tubes out, throwing some tubeless valve stems and some sealant in and airing it back up, it's gonna help reduce a little bit of the weight, help prevent me getting flats, and allow me to run a little bit lower, like tire pressure, air pressure in my tires. Gosh, sometimes talking is difficult, you guys. Allow me to run a lower tire pressure if I want to do so based on the type of trails I'm riding. Now keep in mind, you guys, none of the upgrades I just mentioned are deal breakers. I rode this bike straight out of the box on purpose to show you that you don't need to upgrade anything. For the current sale price on this bike, which is like $14.99, it's a super good deal. The bike even comes with pedals. So other than adding on that water bottle cage, you really don't need to do anything else. You can take this bike out, ride it, and have a ton of fun. But here's the question. After hearing me talk about how good this bike performed, do you really need a more expensive bike? I mean, the average rider like me and like you, do we need to spend $5,000, $10,000 on a mountain bike to get out, go ride, and have fun? I mean, after that ride, on the drive home, I was honestly asking myself, like, what more do I really need? It climbed well, it descended well, it was super fun to ride, and for the price, this thing is really hard to beat. So for me, the Siskiu T7 really proves that you don't need to break the bank to have a perfectly capable trail bike. Sure, this bike leaves that little bit of room for improvement, but for most average riders out there like you and like me, this bike is really more than enough. But leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Is a budget trail bike like this all that the average rider actually needs? And if you guys have made it this far, make sure to smash that like, hit that subscribe, share this with a friend. In the next video, I plan on doing the upgrades. I talked about this bike, so stay tuned. But remember, at the end of the day, it's all about getting stoked, going riding, and having some fun, people.
Not bad at all.